The earth moved first, then came the scream. Jack Lawson watched the hillside collapse in slow motion. Mud and rocks swallowing the black SUV, full headlights flickering once before going dark. Rain sheeted across his windshield, turning the world into a blur of gray and shadow. His daughter was tucked safely at home, waiting for him to return with her medication that would have to wait. Every rational part of him said to keep driving. The storm was intensifying, visibility dropping by the minute. He was already late, and Emma would be worried. But Jack's hands were already reaching for the door, his boots already splashing onto the slick asphalt, his flashlight already slicing through the storm like a blade. Somewhere beneath that mountain of debris, a voice cried out, faint, breaking, desperate. The voice grew weaker as Jack scrambled up the unstable slope, each step a gamble against gravity. Rocks tumbled past him in the darkness, bouncing off the buried vehicle with hollow thuds. His flashlight beam cut through the rain, finding the SUV's rear window first spider-webbed with cracks, then sweeping down to where the driver's door had crumpled inward. "Hold on to me, not the car. The car can't be saved anymore, but you can." The words left Jack's mouth with the practiced authority of his former life, a life he'd left behind 8 years ago. He wedged himself between mud and metal fingers, finding purchase along the doorframe. The woman inside was pinned behind the wheel, blood running from a gash above her left eyebrow, one leg trapped by the collapsed dashboard. Her clothes, expensive, now ruined by mud and rain, suggested someone far from home. Yet when her eyes found his in the beam of his flashlight, he saw something flicker there beyond the fear. Recognition, almost like she'd been expecting him. Jack shook off the strange thought and focused on the immediate problem. The mud was still moving, still settling. They had minutes at best before the whole thing shifted again. He ran back to his truck boots, slipping on wet asphalt, and grabbed the winch cable and crowbar from the bed. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory, from a time when this had been his job, his purpose. Before Laura's name on his phone screen, before the hospital, before the terrible silence that followed. Jack pushed the memories down and threaded the cable through the SUV's frame, finding leverage points for the crowbar. He called through the broken window, his voice nearly lost in the wind and rain. "This is going to hurt. I need you to stay still, stay calm, and trust me. Can you do that?" The woman nodded, jaw set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. Good, she was a fighter. She'd need to be. He wedged the crowbar into the gap between the door and frame and threw his weight against it. The metal groaned and protested before finally giving way with a shriek that set his teeth on edge. Jack reached inside one arm, sliding behind her shoulders, while his other hand worked to free her trapped leg from the twisted metal. "This is going to hurt," he warned again, meeting her eyes so she'd know he meant it. She gave him the barest nod, teeth already clenched. Jack pulled. Her scream cut through the storm sharp and raw, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. The hillside was still moving, and if he didn't get her clear right now, they'd both be buried. Her leg came free, and Jack half carried, half dragged her away from the wreckage, his arms locked around her waist as they slid down the muddy slope together. Behind them, the earth gave one final ominous groan. When Jack glanced back, the SUV had vanished, completely swallowed by the landslide as if it had never existed. He didn't let himself think about how close that had been. Didn't let himself calculate the seconds between her freedom and her death. He just kept moving, kept his grip tight on this stranger he had pulled from the mud until they reached the relative safety of his truck. Jack laid her carefully in the covered bed, trying to keep her out of the worst of the rain. Her face had gone pale, lips taking on a bluish tint that he recognized as shock setting in. He worked quickly, pulling the first aid kit from behind the driver's seat and using what he had to clean and bandage the head wound to stabilize her leg with a makeshift splint. Emma's careful handwriting was still on the labels, each item sorted and stored with methodical precision. His 9-year-old had the organizational skills of a field medic, a thought that brought both pride and a deep sadness. No child should know how to prepare for emergencies with such precision. But then Emma had never been an ordinary child. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked, mumbling words he couldn't quite make out over the drumming rain. Her hand kept reaching for his arm, fingers brushing against the old scar on his forearm before falling away. Jack finished wrapping her head wound and pulled his jacket off, draping it over her shivering form. His phone showed no signal, which didn't surprise him. Highway 89 was a dead zone on the best of days, let alone in the middle of a storm like this. He started the engine and pointed the truck toward Pine Ridge, driving slowly on the slick roads, one eye constantly checking the rear-view mirror to make sure she was still breathing. The heater coughed to life, pushing out air that smelled like old coffee and sawdust. Jack's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, an anxious rhythm he couldn't seem to stop. Something about this felt different. Not the rescue itself, but the way she'd looked at him. The way her finger had found that scar like they'd known exactly where to search. 20 minutes later, the lights of his cabin appeared through the trees and Jack felt something in his chest unclench slightly. Home. Safe. He parked as close to the porch as he could manage and killed the engine. Through the windshield, he could see Emma's small face pressed against the front window, her eyes wide with worry. She was supposed to be asleep by now. Of course she wasn't. His daughter had inherited her mother's stubborn streak along with her eyes. Jack gathered the unconscious woman in his arms and carried her inside, shouldering through the door that Emma held open. His daughter didn't ask questions, just moved immediately to help grabbing towels and the good first aid kit from the bathroom, while Jack laid the woman on their old couch. The same couch where he and Laura had planned their future, where they'd picked out baby names and talked about the kind of parents they wanted to be. Jack forced the memories back and focused on the present, on this stranger who needed his help, on Emma's steady hands passing him scissors and gauze. Is she going to be okay? Emma whispered, her voice small in the quiet cabin. The storm outside seemed distant now, muted as if the walls themselves were holding back the chaos. Jack checked the woman's pulse again, steady and strong, beneath his fingers, and nodded. She will be, but she needs a real doctor. Her leg needs an x-ray, maybe surgery. As soon as the road's clear, we'll get her to the clinic. Emma settled into the armchair with her stuffed rabbit, keeping watch with the kind of calm acceptance that came from too many nights like this. Too many strangers on their couch. Too many emergencies that had become routine. Jack cleaned the woman's injuries more thoroughly now that he had proper light and supplies. The head wound would need stitches, which he could manage. He'd done it before. His hands were steady as he worked, threading the needle, closing the gash, with small, precise stitches that would minimize scarring. The woman didn't stir, lost somewhere deep in unconsciousness, and Jack was grateful for that small mercy. This part always hurt, no matter how careful he was. When he finished, he sat back and really looked at her for the first time. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair plastered to her head. Manicured nails now chipped and broken. The watch on her wrist probably cost more than his truck. Everything about her screamed money, success, a life lived in boardrooms and high-rises, not small Montana towns where everyone knew your name and your business. What had brought someone like her to Highway 89 in the middle of a storm? Just before midnight, her eyes fluttered open. Jack was dozing in the armchair, Emma curled against his shoulder in deep sleep, when he felt the shift in the room's energy. He looked up to find the woman staring at him. Her gaze unfocused at first, then sharpening as consciousness returned. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the fire Jack had built earlier and the soft sound of Emma's breathing. Then the woman's eyes dropped to his arm, to where his sleeve had ridden up, exposing the long, jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. Her eyes went wide, her hand lifting toward him before falling back weakly to the couch. You, she breathed the word, barely audible. Jack frowned, confused by the recognition in her voice, by the way she was looking at him, like she'd found something she'd been searching for. You're safe. You were in an accident. Landslide on the highway. You're at my cabin. I'll get you to a doctor in the morning when the road's clear. But she was shaking her head, trying to push herself up, despite the obvious pain it caused her. Your arm, that scar. I know that scar. Her voice was rough, cracking with emotion and dehydration. Jack carefully shifted Emma onto a pillow and stood moving to pour water from the pitcher on the side table. He held the glass to the woman's lips, supporting her head while she drank, watching her throat work as she swallowed. When she'd had enough, she pulled back and looked at him again with that same intense focus. I've been looking for you, she whispered. For 8 years, I've been looking for someone with a scar like that. Someone who... But whatever she was about to say was lost as her eyes rolled back and she slumped against the cushions, unconscious again. Jack stood frozen, the empty glass still in his hand, his mind racing back 8 years. The Duwamish River, the bus accident, the little girl he'd pulled from the water. and everything that came after. He set the glass down with hands that weren't quite steady and returned to the armchair. Sleep wouldn't come now. Instead, Jack sat in the dark and watched the woman on his couch. This stranger who'd recognized a scar he rarely thought about anymore, who'd been searching for someone like him for reasons he couldn't begin to guess. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountains. But inside Jack's chest, a different kind of storm was gathering, the feeling that his carefully constructed life, his 8 years of isolation and routine and emotional distance, was about to come crashing down around him. Morning arrived slowly, the dawn gray and hesitant, behind thick clouds that promised more rain. Jack woke to find Emma already in the kitchen, standing on a step stool to reach the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal with the concentration of someone performing surgery. The domestic normality of it made his chest ache. This was their life, just the two of them, simple and safe and predictable. But the woman on the couch represented something else entirely. Questions he didn't want to answer, a past he'd tried to leave behind, connections to a version of himself he'd worked hard to bury. "Is the lady awake yet?" Emma asked without turning around, adjusting the heat under the pot with practiced ease. Jack moved to help her, taking over the stirring while she got down bowls from the cabinet. "Not yet, but she will be soon. And when she is, she's going to have questions." Emma looked up at him with Laura's eyes too wise for her 9 years. "Are you going to answer them?" Jack wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the walls he'd built so carefully. But looking at his daughter, he found he couldn't lie to her. "I don't know, kiddo. I honestly don't know." The woman stirred just as they were finishing breakfast, her eyes opening to take in the unfamiliar cabin, the morning light filtering through windows, the smell of coffee and oatmeal. Jack watched her piece together where she was, saw the moment memory returned, and pain registered in her features. He poured her water and brought it over, helping her sit up enough to drink without choking. "How do you feel?" She grimaced, one hand moving to her bandaged head. "Like I got buried by a mountain, which I guess I did. You saved me." Jack set the water glass on the side table. "Just happened to be driving by. Your leg's going to need a doctor. I stabilized it, but you'll want an x-ray. There's a clinic in town. I can take you there this afternoon if the roads are passable." The woman nodded, but her eyes never left his face, searching for something he didn't understand. Emma appeared in the doorway holding a bowl of oatmeal, and the woman's expression softened immediately when she saw the little girl. "Hi," Emma said with her characteristic directness, moving closer. "I'm Emma. You were talking in your sleep last night about someone named Sophia." The woman's eyes filled with tears so suddenly it startled Jack. Her hand went to her mouth, and for a moment she couldn't speak. When she finally found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Sophia is my daughter. She's 12 now, safe at home in San Francisco with my mother." She looked at Jack again, and he saw something desperate in her gaze. "I was coming to Montana to find someone. Someone who saved her life 8 years ago when she was 4. I never got his name, but I remembered his scar." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma looked from the woman to Jack and back again, her sharp mind clearly working through the puzzle. Jack felt his chest tighten, felt the past rushing up to meet the present in a collision he'd been avoiding for 8 years. "I don't know your name," he said finally, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. The woman straightened slightly, wincing at the movement. Rebecca Morgan." "Rebecca," he echoed. "I'll get you into town as soon as I can. There's a motel on Main Street. You can stay there while your leg heals." Rebecca shook her head, frustration crossing her face. "You don't understand. I've been searching for 8 years. Hired investigators followed every lead. I finally tracked it down to this area, this highway." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Please just tell me. Were you in Seattle 8 years ago? Did you pull a little girl from the Duwamish River?" The question hung there, demanding an answer Jack wasn't ready to give. Emma was watching him with those knowing eyes, and he could see her putting the pieces together, understanding why he'd gone so still, why his jaw had clenched. Jack stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. "Emma, can you help Ms. Morgan with her breakfast? I need to check on the roads." He was out the door before either of them could respond, bracing his hands on the hood of his truck and breathing. Just breathing, trying to steady himself against the wave of memory threatening to pull him under. The Duwamish River, cold and dark and swollen from spring rains. The bus teetering on the edge before sliding and passengers screaming. Jack hadn't thought had just moved diving in while other bystanders stood frozen. The little girl in the purple jacket, her dark curls floating around her face, her small body limp when he pulled her free, handing her to the paramedics. The phone ringing, Laura's name on the screen, the world ending. Jack didn't know how long he stood there, rain starting to fall again, in a light mist before he heard the cabin door open. Emma came to stand beside him, slipping her small hand into his larger one. She didn't say anything, just stood there with him in the rain. And Jack was grateful for her presence, for the way she always seemed to know when he needed her silent support. "She's been looking for you for a really long time," Emma said finally. "That's kind of amazing, actually. How many people spend 8 years trying to say thank you?" "It's complicated, Emma." His daughter squeezed his hand. "I know everything with you is complicated, but maybe this time it's okay. Maybe complicated doesn't have to be bad." She looked up at him with Laura's eyes, and Jack felt something crack in his chest. "You should tell her the truth, Dad. She came all this way. She deserves to know." Jack knew, standing there in the rain with his daughter, that she was right. He took a breath and nodded. "Okay, you're right. I'll tell her." The rain had softened to a drizzle by mid-morning, and Jack helped Rebecca into his truck, while Emma watched from the porch. The drive into Pine Ridge was quiet except for the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers. Rebecca stared out the window at the pine trees sliding past her reflection, ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. "I was looking for someone when I crashed," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "Someone who saved my daughter 8 years ago in Seattle. There was an accident. A bus went into the Duwamish River. My daughter Sophia was 4 years old." Jack's foot nearly slipped off the gas pedal. The Duwamish. The bus. The little girl with the dark curls and the purple jacket. Her small body so light in his arms as he carried her to shore. Rebecca was still talking, her voice thick with emotion now. "A man pulled her out of the water. I never got his name, never got to thank him, but I remembered his scar on his left arm." She paused, and Jack could feel her looking at him. "Like yours." The truck rolled to a stop in front of the Pine Ridge Medical Clinic, a small brick building that looked more like a house than a hospital. Jack sat frozen, his hand still gripping the wheel, his mind racing through the implications. She knew, or she suspected. And if she was here in this tiny town in Montana, it meant she'd been searching. For 8 years she'd been searching. The weight of that devotion pressed down on Jack's chest like a physical thing. He turned to look at her, finally really look at her, and saw the tears tracking down her face, the desperate hope in her eyes. "Please," Rebecca whispered, the word breaking in the middle. "Tell me it was you. Tell me you're the one who saved Sophia." Jack wanted to deny it, wanted to shake his head and help her into the clinic and drive away and never see her again. But he couldn't. Not when this woman had spent nearly a decade trying to find him, trying to say thank you for something he'd barely thought about since it happened. "It was me," Jack said quietly, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. "But I didn't do anything special. Rebecca's sob cut him off. And then she was reaching for him, her hands finding his arm, tracing that scar with shaking fingers. "You saved her. You saved my baby girl. And I never got to thank you. I couldn't find you. I tried everything, every search, every database, but you just vanished." Jack gently pulled his arm back, overwhelmed by her intensity. "I left Seattle. After that day, I had to." Rebecca wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Why didn't you stay? People wanted to thank you, to celebrate you." Jack's laugh was harsh, cutting. "Because an hour after I pulled your daughter out of that river, my wife died in a car accident. While I was being the hero for someone else's family, mine was falling apart." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and brutal. Rebecca's face crumpled, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "It wasn't your fault. None of it was." Jack took a breath, steadying himself. "My wife Laura was 7 months pregnant. The drunk driver killed them both. So yes, I saved your daughter, but I lost my family in the process." Rebecca was crying openly now, shaking her head. "You couldn't have known. You did an incredible thing saving Sophia. You gave her life." Jack's voice was flat. "And it cost me everything I loved. So forgive me if I don't feel particularly heroic about it." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Rebecca's quiet crying. Finally, she wiped her eyes and looked at him. I understand if you never want to see me again, but please know that Sophia is alive and thriving because of you. She's smart and kind and building a life that matters, and that has to count for something. Jack didn't respond, couldn't find words that felt adequate. After a moment, he got out of the truck and came around to help her down. Dr. Mitchell took one look at Rebecca and ushered her inside with practiced efficiency, giving Jack a curious glance but asking no questions. Jack waited in the truck, gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide if he was going to drive away the moment she was inside and never look back. But he couldn't make himself do it, couldn't make his hands turn the key. An hour later, Rebecca emerged on crutches, her leg in a proper cast, her head wound, freshly bandaged. Jack drove her to the Pine Ridge Motor Lodge without speaking, helped her check in, carried her small overnight bag to her room. The room was dated but clean with floral wallpaper and heavy curtains. Rebecca sank onto the bed with obvious relief. Jack set her bag on the dresser and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. Jack, please, I need you to know something. Sophia asks about you every year on the anniversary of the accident. She wants to know the name of the man who saved her life. She wants to say thank you. Would you let me at least tell her your name? Jack stood with his hand on the doorknob, his back to Rebecca, fighting with himself. The easy thing would be to say no, to walk away, and let them keep wondering. But he was tired. 8 years of running, of hiding, and he was just so damn tired. Tell her, he said quietly. Tell her my name is Jack Lawson. Tell her I'm glad she's okay. Behind him, he heard Rebecca's breath hitch. Thank you, Jack, for everything, for saving her, for telling me the truth. Jack finally looked back at her. Could I see you again? Rebecca stumbled over her words. Before I leave, I'd like to thank Emma for helping take care of me. Jack's first instinct was to refuse to keep his daughter separate from this woman and the complicated feelings she stirred up. But he thought about Emma's words. She deserves to know. Maybe complicated doesn't have to be bad. Maybe, he said carefully. I'll talk to Emma, see how she feels about it. Rebecca's smile broke through her tears. That's all I ask. Thank you. Jack nodded and left, pulling the door closed behind him. When he got home, Emma was waiting on the porch. She ran to him and he caught her up, holding her tight. Did you tell her? She asked when he set her down. I told her everything. Emma studied his face. How do you feel? Jack considered the question. Tired, sad, but maybe a little lighter too. Like I've been carrying a secret that was too heavy, and now it's not just mine anymore. Emma nodded, understanding in a way that seemed far too mature. Are we going to see her again, Ms. Rebecca? Do you want to? Emma thought about it seriously. I think so. She seems nice, and she's been looking for you for 8 years, Dad. That's a really long time to search for someone just to say thank you. I think that means something. The next afternoon, Jack and Emma drove into town with fresh bread and a thermos of soup. Rebecca was sitting up in bed when they arrived, her laptop open, clearly trying to work despite her injuries. But she closed it immediately when she saw them, her whole face lighting up. You came, she said, and Jack could hear the relief in her voice. Emma climbed up on the bed carefully and started showing her the drawing she'd brought. This is the storm, Emma explained, and this is my dad saving you. Rebecca studied the drawing with genuine attention. You captured it perfectly. You're very talented, Emma. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Jack and Emma would visit in the afternoons, bringing meals or books, or just company. Emma would draw while Rebecca worked, occasionally asking questions about her job or San Francisco or what Sophia was like. And Rebecca would tell stories about her daughter's love of engineering, about the bridge sensors her company had developed, about the trips they'd taken together. Slowly, Jack found himself relaxing around her, found himself actually enjoying their conversations when Emma was occupied with her drawings. The way Rebecca's eyes crinkled when she laughed, the sharp intelligence behind her questions, the genuine warmth she showed Emma, all of it was becoming familiar, comfortable. On the 4th day, Emma was outside sketching the mountains in mountains. When Rebecca asked the question Jack had been dreading, "Can I do something for you, Jack? To thank you properly for saving Sophia?" He shook his head immediately. You don't owe me anything. Rebecca's expression was patient. I know I don't owe you in any legal or moral sense, but I want to help. Emma is incredibly talented. What if I set up an education fund for her? Just knowing it's there, that her future is secure. Would you let me do that? Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. No, I don't want your money, Rebecca. That's not why I saved Sophia. That's not why I pulled you out of that landslide. Rebecca looked up at him calmly. I know that's not why you did it, but that doesn't mean I can't want to help the man who gave me back my daughter. Jack turned away, staring out the window at Emma sketching. You want to help? Then go back to San Francisco. Live your life with Sophia. Be grateful if you need to be. But let me go. Rebecca was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I can't do that. I spent 8 years looking for you, Jack. 8 years wondering if you were okay. If you knew what you'd done, if you understood how much it mattered. I can't just walk away now that I've finally found you. Jack turned back to face her. Why? Why does it matter so much? You have Sophia. She's alive and healthy. Isn't that enough? Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Because finding you was the only thing that made sense after my marriage fell apart. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. My ex-husband thought I was obsessed. He said I cared more about some stranger who saved Sophia than about our actual life together. Maybe he was right. But every time I looked at Sophia, I saw you. This person who'd risked everything for a child he didn't know. And I needed to understand why. Needed to know if people like you actually existed. Her voice broke. I needed to believe there was still good in the world. Real good. Not performative or calculated, just good. And you were my proof. Rebecca wiped at her eyes. So no, I can't let it go because you're the proof I needed that the world isn't completely broken. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Jack sank back into the chair, the fight draining out of him. He understood that need, that desperate search for evidence that the world wasn't just chaos and loss. I'm not good, Jack said quietly. I'm just a guy who makes the same choice over and over, hoping it'll fix something it never will. Rebecca reached out her fingers, brushing his hand. Maybe that's what good is. Not some grand, heroic gesture or being perfect. Maybe it's just the choice to keep showing up, even when it doesn't fix anything. Even when it costs you everything. Jack looked down at her hand on his and felt something crack in his chest. Before he could respond, Emma burst through the door, her drawing clutched in both hands, and the moment shattered. The drawing was beautiful, the mountains rendered in detail that surprised even Jack. Rebecca studied it seriously, then looked up at Emma. This is incredible. You have real talent. Emma beamed. Could I keep this? Rebecca asked, and Emma nodded eagerly. Rebecca carefully rolled the drawing. I'm going to hang it in my office, so I can remember Pine Ridge. The words carried weight and acknowledgement that she'd be leaving soon. That night, after Emma was asleep, Jack received a notification from the county. Property taxes were due, and they'd increased again. He stared at the number on the screen, mentally calculating how many extra shifts he'd need to pick up, how many repairs he'd need to do for the neighbors. It wasn't impossible, but it would be tight. Every year it got tighter. The cabin needed a new roof before winter. The truck was making that noise again. Emma was growing out of her clothes faster than he could replace them. And now, with the medical supplies he'd used for Rebecca, Jack closed the email and rubbed his eyes. He'd figure it out. He always did. One day at a time, one problem at a time. That was how they'd survived for 8 years. But for the first time, he found himself wondering if surviving was enough. If this narrow existence he'd carved out was really the best he could offer Emma. If staying hidden was still protecting her, or if it was starting to limit her. The next morning, Jack was chopping wood when Mayor Thompson's truck pulled into his driveway. The mayor was a solid man in his 60s with a perpetual squint and a handshake that could crush bones. He'd been kind to Jack when he first arrived, helping him find odd jobs and keeping the more curious locals at bay. Morning, Jack. The mayor nodded, hands in his pockets. Heard you pulled someone out of the mud during that storm. Rebecca Morgan, CEO of Horizon Tech. Quite a catch saving someone like that. Jack kept chopping, the rhythm of the axe steady and predictable. She's just a person who needed help. She's staying at the motor lodge, been asking around town about you. The axe bit deeper into the wood. What's she been asking? How long you've been here? What you do? If you've ever mentioned Seattle. The mayor's eyes were shrewd. Should I be concerned, Jack? Is she trouble? Jack set down the axe and wiped his forehead. No, she's just grateful. I helped her daughter once a long time ago, before I came here. Anything I should know about? Nothing that matters now. The mayor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I trust your judgment. But just so you know, word travels fast in Pine Ridge. Strangers asking questions gets people talking, especially when those strangers are worth millions and show up in the middle of a storm. After the mayor left, Jack stood in the yard, the weight of the town's curiosity settling on him like a physical burden. 8 years of carefully maintained privacy threatened by a chance encounter on a rainy highway. Or maybe not by chance at all. Rebecca had been searching for him, following leads. How close had she been before the storm? How much had she already discovered? When he visited Rebecca that afternoon, the questions burned in his throat, but he couldn't bring himself to ask them. Not with Emma there hanging on Rebecca's every word as she described the Golden Gate Bridge and how her company's sensors help monitor its structural integrity. The bridge moves, you know, Rebecca was saying, her hands gesturing expressively. It's designed to, it has to flex and bend with the wind, with the weight of traffic, with the expansion and contraction of the metal as temperatures change. Emma's eyes were wide. Like breathing, exactly like breathing. And our sensors are like doctors listening to that breath, making sure it sounds right. Jack watched the exchange, something tightening in his chest. Emma so rarely got to talk to people who understood her fascination with how things worked. In their small world, her interests were odd. Her questions often met with indulgent smiles rather than real answers. But Rebecca answered. She explained elaborated drew diagrams on her notepad. She spoke to Emma not as a child, but as a mind worthy of respect, of real information. Later, as they were leaving, Rebecca caught Jack's arm. I got a call from San Francisco. There's a situation at the company I need to handle. I should be able to do it remotely, but you might need to go back, Jack finished for her. Rebecca nodded, her expression apologetic. Not yet, but soon. The leg complicates things, but my team can only manage without me for so long. Jack felt an unexpected pang at the thought of her leaving. Of course, you have responsibilities. Before I go, I'd like to tell Sophia I've found you. That you're okay, that you have a daughter her age who's interested in engineering just like her. The request hung in the air between them, simple on the surface but complex beneath. Telling Sophia meant making this real, making connections that couldn't be easily severed, acknowledging a shared past that might demand a shared future. I need to think about it, Jack said finally. Rebecca squeezed his arm gently. Take all the time you need, I understand. But did she? Did she understand what it meant to him, to Emma, to open their carefully contained world, to risk attachments to people who would inevitably leave, to acknowledge a past he had worked so hard to leave behind? That evening, the forecast announced another storm approaching, this one, potentially worse than the last. Heavy snowfall expected, possible power outages, roads likely impassable for days. Jack checked their supplies, food, water, firewood, batteries, and found them wanting. The repairs for the roof would have to wait. Right now, they needed to prepare for the storm. As he was loading supplies into his truck the next morning, his phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Jack Lawson. Mr. Lawson, this is Diane from the Pine Ridge Motor Lodge. I'm calling about Ms. Morgan. She's not doing well. Her leg is swollen and she's running a fever. She's asking for you. Jack's stomach dropped. Infection. The doctor had warned about this possibility. I'll be right there. Have you called Dr. Mitchell? He's on his way, but the roads are already getting bad with the storm coming in. Jack hung up and called to Emma, who was inside packing her own emergency bag. Change of plans, kiddo. We need to check on Rebecca first. Emma appeared in the doorway, her small face serious. Is she okay? She will be, Jack said, hoping it was true, but we need to hurry. They found Rebecca pale and sweating, her leg angry red around the cast. Dr. Mitchell was already there, cutting away the plaster to examine the infection site. Looks like we missed a piece of debris, he murmured, probing gently. It's working its way out now, causing an infection. Rebecca's eyes found Jack's, glazed with fever, but still recognizing him. You came, she whispered. Of course we came. Jack moved to her side, taking her hand without thinking. It was hot, too hot in his grasp. What do you need, Doc? I need to clean this out, get her on IV antibiotics, but the clinic's generator is acting up, and with this storm coming. Dr. Mitchell looked at Jack meaningfully. Could use your help with that generator while I work on her leg. Jack understood the unspoken question. The clinic was the better medical option, but the motel had a backup generator and would be easier to reach in a snowstorm. We'll take her to the clinic. I'll fix the generator. The decision made, they moved quickly. Jack carried Rebecca to his truck while Dr. Mitchell gathered his supplies. Emma rode in the back with Rebecca holding her hand and talking to her in a steady voice about nothing and everything, keeping her conscious, keeping her focused. At the clinic, Jack left them to their work and headed for the generator shed. The ancient machine was stubborn, refusing to start despite his best efforts. Jack worked methodically, checking fuel lines, spark plugs, wiring. The wind was picking up outside, the first heavy flakes of snow beginning to fall. Finally, the generator coughed to life, the lights in the clinic stabilizing. Jack returned to find Rebecca settled in a bed, ivy in her arm, her face still flushed, but her eyes clearer. Dr. Mitchell pulled him aside. The infection is serious, but we caught it in time. She'll need to stay here for a few days, and she shouldn't travel for at least a week after that. With this storm coming, you might want to consider taking her to Billings, where they have a proper hospital. Jack looked out the window at the rapidly deteriorating weather. We'd never make it to Billings in this. The pass will be closed within hours. Mitchell sighed. Then we make do here. I've given her the strongest antibiotics I have. The rest is up to her body, and a bit of luck. Emma was sitting beside Rebecca's bed, showing her a book of local wildflowers, pointing out her favorites. Rebecca was listening intently, as if Emma's catalog of pine forest flora was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. Jack watched them for a moment, struck by how natural they looked together, how easy their connection seemed, despite the vast differences in their lives. Something twisted in his chest, worry, affection, fear, all tangled together. As the snow fell harder outside, Jack realized they wouldn't be making it home tonight. The storm had arrived earlier than predicted, and already the roads were becoming treacherous. They were effectively trapped at the clinic until it passed. Rebecca drifted in and out of sleep as the afternoon wore on, the antibiotics making her drowsy. Emma curled up in a chair with a book from the clinic's small waiting room, occasionally reading passages aloud when she thought Rebecca was awake. Jack alternated between checking on the generator, helping Dr. Mitchell with other patients who braved the storm for treatment, and sitting quietly by Rebecca's bed when Emma needed a break. During one of these quiet moments, with the snow falling in thick curtains outside the window and the wind howling around the eaves, Rebecca opened her eyes and found Jack watching her. "You're still here," she murmured. "Storm's too bad to leave," Jack said simply. Rebecca's smile was tired but genuine. "Lucky me. How's the leg?" "Hurts like hell, but better than being buried in mud, so I won't complain." Jack almost smiled at that, almost. Rebecca shifted slightly, wincing with the movement. "I need to call Sophia. She'll be worried if she doesn't hear from me today." "Do you want me to get your phone?" She nodded. "In my bag, thank you." Jack retrieved the sleek smartphone from her overnight bag, noting absently that it probably cost more than he made in a month. He handed it to her, then started to move away to give her privacy. Stay, Rebecca said, her voice soft but firm. "Please, I want Sophia to meet you, even if it's just on a phone screen." Jack hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the pull of Rebecca's request. Finally, he nodded and sat back down. Rebecca dialed, and after a moment, a young girl's face appeared on the screen. Dark hair, serious eyes, a smile that transformed her whole face when she saw her mother. "Mom, I was getting worried. You didn't call last night." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I've been a little under the weather, but I'm okay, I promise." Sophia's eyes narrowed, taking in what she could see of the clinic room. "Are you in a hospital?" "What happened?" "Just a minor infection. Nothing serious." Rebecca angled the phone slightly so Jack was visible in the frame. "Sophia, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Jack. He's been taking care of me." Sophia studied Jack for a moment, her expression curious. "Hi, Jack. Thank you for helping my mom." Jack nodded, and uncomfortable under the girl's scrutiny. "She's been pretty easy to take care of, apart from the infection." Rebecca smiled, then turned the phone again. "And this is Emma, Jack's daughter. She's been keeping me company." Emma looked up from her book and waved. "Hi. Your mom tells me you like engineering. I'm drawing a bridge right now. I want to see." Sophia's face lit up, and just like that, the two girls were chatting like old friends, Emma showing her sketches, Sophia explaining the principles of suspension bridges. Jack watched Rebecca watching them. saw the soft wonder in her eyes, the same emotion he felt seeing Emma connect so easily with someone who understood her. For a moment, just a moment, he could see a different life. A life where Emma had friends who shared her interests, where she wasn't isolated in a small town with a father who kept the world at arm's length. A life with more possibilities than Pine Ridge could offer. The thought was like a splinter, small but impossible to ignore once lodged. The call ended with promises to talk again tomorrow, with Sophia extracting a solemn vow from Emma to send pictures of her completed bridge design. When Rebecca set the phone down, her eyes were damp. "She likes you," she said to Emma. "She doesn't usually take to people so quickly." Emma beamed. "I like her too. She knows a lot about bridges. She'd love to show you the Golden Gate someday, and Alcatraz, and the cable cars." Rebecca's gaze shifted to Jack. "If you ever wanted to visit, I mean, you'd both be welcome. Always." The invitation hung in the air, impossible to ignore, equally impossible to accept. Jack looked away out at the snow that was quickly burying the town and said nothing. That night, with the storm howling outside and the clinic quiet except for the hum of machines, Jack sat in the uncomfortable chair beside Rebecca's bed and watched her sleep. Emma was curled up on a cot Dr. Mitchell had set up, her breathing deep and even. Jack thought about the file he kept locked in his desk at home. His old name, his old life. Newspaper clippings about the bus accident, about his rescue of the little girl of Sophia, and later articles about Laura's death, the drunk driver who'd crossed the center line, while Jack was still giving his statement to the police at the scene of the bus accident. The timing had been so cruel, so precise in its devastation. If he'd been 15 minutes faster at the river, if he'd left as soon as the paramedics arrived instead of staying to help with the other passengers, if he'd been with Laura instead of being a hero for strangers, it had been easier to disappear than to face the questions, the congratulations for one act that had cost him everything else. Easier to change his name, to move to a place where no one knew him, to raise Emma away from the shadow of that day. But now Rebecca had found him. And with her came all the questions, all the what-ifs, all the might-have-beens that he'd spent 8 years trying to outrun. The night deepened, the storm intensified, and Jack Lawson sat vigil beside the woman who had shattered his carefully constructed peace, wondering if she'd also shown him the first real path to healing he'd seen in 8 long years. The snowstorm intensified overnight, transforming Pine Ridge into an isolated island of white. Power lines sagged beneath crystalline weight, roads disappeared under pristine drifts, and the wind howled a warning to those foolish enough to venture outside. For 3 days, Jack, Emma, and Rebecca remained at the clinic, their planned overnight stay extending as nature dictated its own timeline. Rebecca's fever broke on the second day, the angry red streaks receding from her leg. By the third morning, she was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks, her laptop balanced precariously as she fielded urgent emails from San Francisco. The storm had done what illness couldn't, forced her to delegate responsibilities she'd previously insisted only she could handle. Jack spent hours at the clinic's backup generator, coaxing the temperamental machine through the bitter cold. Between maintenance rounds, he helped Dr. Mitchell with the handful of patients who braved the storm, a rancher with a chainsaw gash, a pregnant woman experiencing contractions, an elderly man whose oxygen concentrator had failed when the power went out. Emma moved between worlds, drawing quietly beside Rebecca, helping Jack organize supplies, charming the clinic staff with her serious questions about medical procedures. She'd taken to calling Rebecca every evening, the two girls chatting enthusiastically about bridge design principles and the latest books they'd read. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. The wind died down to occasional gusts, allowing the town's plows to begin clearing main streets. Jack stepped outside, assessing the foot of snow blanketing the clinic's parking lot. His truck sat nearly buried, just the roof visible above the white expanse. Jack returned to the clinic room, snow dusting his shoulders, to find Rebecca sitting on the edge of the bed, her laptop closed. "The roads are clearing," he announced, brushing the melting flakes from his coat. "Dr. Mitchell thinks you can be moved today if you're feeling up to it." Rebecca's expression brightened. "Back to the motel." Jack shook his head. "Motel's still without power. Town's working to restore the main lines, but it could be days before they reach that section." "Where then?" Jack hesitated, the words forming reluctantly. "Our cabin. The wood stove keeps it plenty warm, and we've got a generator for the essentials. It's not much, but it sounds perfect." Rebecca interrupted, relief evident in her voice. Truly, I just need to be somewhere I can work without the constant beeping of medical equipment. My board is having kittens over the storm, delaying my return. 2 hours later, Jack pulled into his driveway, the truck's chains crunching through virgin snow. The cabin stood sturdy against the white backdrop smoke already curling from the chimney misses. Larson from next door had stalked the fire before the worst of the storm, a neighborly gesture Jack had come to rely on during emergencies. Inside the cabin was cold but not freezing. Jack immediately set about building up the fire while Emma showed Rebecca to the small guest room, really just a converted storage space with a twin bed, but private at least. Their routine established over the next hours, Jack clearing paths, checking the generator, bringing in firewood. Emma organizing their storm supplies, making hot chocolate, setting up Rebecca's workspace at the kitchen table. Rebecca alternating between work calls and rest periods prescribed by Dr. Mitchell. That evening, after a simple dinner of canned stew and the last of the bread from town, they sat around the fire. The cabin creaked and settled in the frigid night air, but inside was warm, almost cozy. Emma dozed on the couch, her sketchbook open beside hers. Jack added another log to the fire, the routine motion comforting in its familiarity. "Your daughter adapts remarkably well," Rebecca observed quietly, watching Emma sleep. "She seems completely unfazed by any of this storm's stranger's medical emergencies." Jack poked at the embers, sending sparks up the chimney. "She's had to adapt. Life doesn't give much warning before it changes. Like when you left Seattle." The question hung in the air, direct yet not accusatory. Jack sat back on his heels, eyes still on the fire. "We didn't exactly have a plan, just packed what fit in the truck and drove east. Stopped when we found this place. And became Jack Lawson instead of Jack Marshall, former firefighter and rescue swimmer. Widower. That guy died the same day Laura did." Rebecca studied his profile, the firelight casting half his face in shadow. "Do you ever miss him, the man you were before?" Jack's shoulders tensed, then relaxed on a long exhale. "Sometimes. He was more connected to people, to purpose. He believed in things. And Jack Lawson doesn't." A log shifted in the fire, collapsing in on itself. "Jack Lawson believes in keeping his head down and his daughter safe. That's enough." Rebecca's gaze shifted to Emma, peaceful in sleep, her dark lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. Is it really enough for her?" Jack didn't answer, but the question burrowed deep, finding purchase in soil already tilled by doubt. The following days established a strange domesticity. Rebecca learned the quirks of cabin life, how the hot water ran out after 7 minutes, how to bank the fire for the night, which floorboards creaked and which didn't. Jack watched her adapt with surprising grace, her designer clothes replaced by borrowed flannel and wool socks, her manicured nails chipped and practical. She seemed smaller somehow, more human, away from the trappings of her CEO persona. Emma thrived with another adult in the house, especially one who could discuss advanced mathematics and engineering concepts. They spent hours at the kitchen table, heads bent together over impromptu lessons. Jack caught snippets as he moved through his daily chores, discussions of load-bearing structures, wind resistance calculations, the mathematical principles behind sound bridge design. On the fifth morning, Jack entered the kitchen to find Rebecca at the stove attempting to make pancakes. The first batch lay sacrificed and smoking in the sink, the second not faring much better on the griddle. Emma sat at the table valiantly eating the misshapen results, a smear of syrup on her cheek. "Turns out running a tech company doesn't prepare you for cooking over a wood stove," Rebecca admitted, waving smoke away from the smoke detector. "Emma's being kind, but these are awful." Jack moved to take over his hands, sure as he adjusted the heat, scraped the burnt remnants from the pan, and started fresh. "Running a tech company didn't prepare you for a lot of things. The real world operates differently than boardrooms and corporate retreats." Rebecca's eyebrows rose at the edge in his voice. "You think I don't know that? You think I was born in a corner office? Weren't you private schools, Ivy League, then straight to Silicon Valley?" The bitterness surprised even Jack. But once started, the words continued. "People like you live in a different reality than the rest of us." Emma's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes wide at her father's tone. Rebecca squared her shoulders, the CEO resurfacing beneath the borrowed flannel. "My father was a janitor at MIT. My mother cleaned houses. I went to public school until I earned a scholarship. I worked 3 jobs to supplement that scholarship, graduated with debt I only paid off 5 years ago. Jack stared at her pancake batter dripping unheated from the ladle in his hand. Rebecca wasn't finished. You think I don't understand the real world I grew up in it, Jack? The difference is I didn't run away when it hit me hard. I kept fighting. The silence stretched broken only by the pop and hiss of batter hitting the hot griddle. Finally, Emma pushed back her chair. I'm going to get more firewood, she announced, clearly seeking escape from the tension filling the kitchen. After she left, Jack spoke quietly. I'm sorry, that was unfair. Rebecca leaned against the counter, suddenly looking tired. It's okay. People make assumptions based on where I am now, not how I got there. Still, I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have, Rebecca agreed, but the anger had drained from her voice. Why did you? Jack flipped to the pancakes, buying time before answering. Because it's easier to put you in a box, rich, privileged, separate. Then I don't have to. Have to what? See you, actually see you. Rebecca stepped closer, entering his space by the stove. And if you see me, what happens then? Jack, he met her eyes finally and felt something crack beneath his ribs. Then this gets complicated, and I don't do complicated anymore. Rebecca didn't back away. I think we passed uncomplicated about 5 days ago when you pulled me from that SUV, maybe even 8 years ago by a river in Seattle. Later that day, while chopping firewood to burn off his restless energy, Jack spotted Sheriff Reeves' patrol car pulling into his driveway. The sheriff, a taciturn man with a perpetual sunburn, even in winter, nodded as he approached. Lawson, got a situation I thought you should know about. Sheriff Reeves stamped snow from his boots. Reporter from Billings has been asking questions in town about you and your guest. Jack set down the axe. What kind of questions? The kind that make me think someone tipped him off. He knows she's Rebecca Morgan of Horizon Tech. Knows there's some connection between you two from years back. He's been flashing cash at the diner trying to get people to talk. Jack's jaw tightened. The isolation he'd carefully cultivated for 8 years was crumbling faster than he could shore it up. Anyone talking? Sheriff Reeves shook his head. Not much to tell. Most folks around here mind their business. But he's persistent. Mentioned something about a hero from a bus accident. Wanted to know if you ever lived in Washington State. 8 years of careful anonymity threatened by a reporter chasing a human interest story. Jack could almost see the headline, Tech CEO finds long-lost hero in Montana mountains. The thought made him physically ill. Thanks for the heads up, Jack managed, his voice tight. The sheriff nodded, then hesitated. Look, Jack, I don't know what you're running from, and it's not my business. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially in small towns. Might be better to get ahead of this, control the narrative yourself. After the sheriff left, Jack stood in the snow-covered yard, axe forgotten beside the chopping block. The cold seeped through his boots, a physical counterpoint to the burning anxiety in his chest. He hadn't prepared for this. Hadn't prepared Emma for this. Inside, he found Rebecca on another video call, her voice carrying the polished authority he imagined she used in board meetings. The timeline hasn't changed, Keith. I'll be back when the doctors clear me for travel and not before. In the meantime, proceed with the Thompson proposal as discussed. She ended the call as Jack entered, immediately reading the tension in his posture. What happened? Jack relayed the sheriff's warning, watching her expression shift from concern to determination. I'll handle it, she stated, reaching for her phone. How exactly do you plan to handle a reporter sniffing around my past? Rebecca's fingers flew across her screen. By giving him a different story, one that doesn't involve you or Seattle. She looked up, her gaze steady. Trust me, Jack. Managing the press is part of my job. Trust. Such a simple word for such a monumental request. By evening, Rebecca had made a series of calls that Jack only heard pieces of, mentions of exclusive interviews, of innovation awards, of a profile for the business section. When she finally set her phone down, she looked tired but satisfied. It's handled. I've offered him an exclusive on Horizon's new rural connectivity initiative, a legitimate story that's much more valuable to his career than some vague human interest piece. He'll be leaving town tomorrow to meet my PR team in Billings. Jack stared at her, caught between gratitude and unease. Just like that, you make a few calls and problems disappear. Rebecca's smile was small, knowing. Not disappear. Redirect. It's about understanding what people really want and finding a way to give it to them that works for you too. And what did it cost you, this redirect? An interview I was going to give anyway to an outlet I probably wouldn't have chosen. She shrugged. A fair trade to protect her privacy. The ease with which she'd wielded her influence disturbed Jack even as he recognized the favor she'd done him. This was a glimpse of Rebecca Morgan, CEO, a woman accustomed to shaping the world to her preferences with a few well-placed calls. That night, a new storm blew in, not as severe as the first, but enough to keep them homebound for another day. After Emma went to bed, Jack found Rebecca sitting by the fire staring into the flames, her laptop closed beside her. "Your company must be missing you," he observed, settling into the chair opposite. Rebecca didn't look up from the fire. "They're managing, better than expected, actually. Turns out I'm not as indispensable as I thought." "That bothers you." "It should, shouldn't it?" She turned to him finally. "The company has been my life for so long, especially after the divorce. After Sophia started spending half her time with her father. I filled all those empty spaces with work." Jack recognized the pattern, the way grief or loneliness could be buried under layers of purpose and routine. Hadn't he done the same with his endless chores and repairs and solitary existence? "What happened with your marriage, if you don't mind my asking?" Rebecca's laugh held no humor. "The usual growing apart, different priorities. But the breaking point was my obsession, as he called it, with finding the man who saved Sophia." "Me," Jack said quietly. "You." Rebecca tucked her knees up, making herself smaller in the oversized chair. "I couldn't let it go. Every year on the anniversary of the accident, I'd post on social media, contact the Seattle FD, again hire another investigator. David said I was stuck in the past, that I cared more about a stranger than our family." Was he right? Rebecca was quiet for so long, Jack thought she might not answer. "Maybe. Not about caring more, but about being stuck. I needed to believe there were still good people in the world. People who would dive into a freezing river for a child they didn't know. After everything I'd seen in business, the backstabbing, the lies, the greed, I needed that reminder of humanity at its best. And now you've found me," Jack said, "living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, hiding from the world. Some hero." "But that's just it, Jack. Heroes don't exist. Not really, just people making choices in impossible moments. What matters isn't that you were perfect, it's that when it counted, you chose to help." They fell silent, the fire popping and shifting between them. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the windows in soft, insistent taps. "When Laura died," Jack began, the words coming slowly, painfully. "Everyone called me a hero for saving that little girl, for saving Sophia. Newspapers, TV, the mayor wanted to give me a key to the city." His hands tightened on the chair arms. "And all I could think was that while I was being a hero, my wife was dying alone on a highway." Rebecca's eyes glistened in the firelight. "It wasn't your fault, Jack. You couldn't have known." "No, but I could have been there. Should have been there. Instead, I was giving statements to the police, accepting congratulations from strangers." His voice broke. "She called me, you know. Right after I pulled Sophia out, I was soaking wet, freezing. I saw her name on my phone but didn't answer. Thought I'd call her back in a few minutes when things calmed down." The weight of 8 years of self-recrimination hung on every word. "By the time things calmed down, she was already gone. Her and our son." Rebecca moved from her chair, kneeling beside him, her hand finding his. "Jack, listen to me. What happened to Laura was a tragedy, but it wasn't your punishment for saving a child. The universe doesn't work that way. Doesn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly how it felt. Like the universe was saying, you can save one of you or the other, but not both. And if you'd been with Laura instead, if you hadn't been at that river, Sophia would have drowned and Laura still might have died. The drunk driver would still have crossed that center line." Jack had never allowed himself to consider this version of events, one where his presence might not have changed the outcome for Laura. The possibility was both terrible and freeing. Rebecca's grip on his hand tightened. "You carry this guilt like it's your duty, but it's not. It's just a weight that's keeping you from living. And what would living look like exactly? Moving on, forgetting." Rebecca shook her head, firelight dancing across her features. "No, never forgetting, but maybe remembering without drowning in it, honoring Laura by giving Emma the fullest life possible. Jack looked at their joined hands at this unexpected connection, formed through tragedy and coincidence and stubborn persistence. I don't know how to do that anymore. Then let me help you remember. The next morning broke clear and cold, the storm having moved east overnight. Jack woke early, his conversation with Rebecca still echoing in his mind. He stepped outside to check the generator and found the world transformed, every tree branch encased in ice, the rising sun fracturing through the crystalline landscape into thousands of rainbow prisms. He stood absorbing the beauty, letting himself feel something beyond the persistent numbness that had been his companion for years. Behind him, the cabin door opened and closed softly. Rebecca joined him, bundled in one of his old coats, her breath clouding in the frigid air. "It's incredible," she whispered, gazing at the ice-jeweled forest. "Worth getting stranded for?" Jack asked, surprising himself with the attempt at lightness. Rebecca smiled, the expression transforming her face. "Definitely worth it." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun climb higher, the ice beginning to melt and drop from the highest branches in sporadic tinkling showers. "The road should be clear enough today," Jack noted, reality intruding. "I can drive you back to the motel or to Billings if you'd prefer." Rebecca turned to him, her expression suddenly serious. "I need to get back to San Francisco. The company situation is escalating and Sophia—" She trailed off, then continued more firmly. "But before I go, I'd like to ask you something." Jack braced himself, sensing the weight of whatever was coming. "Would you and Emma consider visiting us in San Francisco? Sophia asks about you every time we talk. She'd love to meet Emma in person." The invitation hit like a physical blow. San Francisco, the city, people, noise, and beyond the logistical concerns, the emotional landmines waiting, reconnecting with a past he'd fled, facing the gratitude he'd rejected, allowing Emma to form attachments to people who lived a world away. "I don't think that's a good idea," he responded automatically, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Rebecca studied him, undeterred. "Why not? What are you afraid will happen?" "I'm not afraid." "Then what's the real reason?" "Because it's not money, I'd cover everything. It's not time, Emma's homeschooled, and winter's your slow season for work." Jack turned away, focusing on the distant mountains rather than Rebecca's searching gaze. "Emma's never been to a city, never been on a plane. She doesn't need that kind of disruption." "Are you sure that's not just what you're telling yourself?" Rebecca's voice was gentle but insistent. "Because from what I've seen, Emma's curious about everything. She asks questions about San Francisco every time she talks to Sophia. She draws skyscrapers and cable cars based on pictures in her books." Each word struck with precision, dismantling the justifications Jack had constructed. Still, he resisted. "It's complicated." "Life is complicated, Jack. Hiding from it doesn't make it simpler, just smaller." The truth of it resonated through him. He had made their world small, controllable. Safe, yes, but also limiting, especially for a bright, curious child like Emma. "I'll think about it," he conceded finally. Rebecca accepted this partial victory with grace. "That's all I ask." Later that morning, they received an unexpected visitor. Mayor Thompson's SUV crawled up the newly plowed driveway, the man himself emerging with a manila envelope in hand and a troubled expression on his weathered face. "Morning, Jack," he called, trudging through the snow. "Ms. Morgan, hope you've weathered the storm all right." Jack nodded instantly, wary of the mayor's formal tone. "We managed. What brings you out here?" Mayor Thompson glanced at Rebecca, then back to Jack. "Got something you should see. Privately, if possible." Rebecca excused herself tactfully, retreating inside the cabin. Once the door closed, the mayor handed Jack the envelope. "This came to my office yesterday. Reporter dropped it off before he left town. Said you'd want to see it." Jack opened the envelope with dread mounting in his chest. Inside were printouts, newspaper articles about the bus accident in Seattle, about a firefighter named Jack Marshall who'd rescued a young girl, a photo of Jack in his uniform receiving a commendation years earlier, a death notice for Laura Marshall and her unborn son, killed by a drunk driver on the same day as the bus accident, and most damning of all, property records showing the transfer of the cabin from James Marshall, Jack's father, to Jack Lawson 6 years ago. He connected the dots, Jack said flatly, his worst fears materializing in black and white. The mayor nodded grimly. Said your friend's offer was better than publishing this, but he wanted you to know he'd figured it out. Called it professional courtesy. The implied threat was clear. The story wasn't dead, just delayed. Rebecca's intervention had bought time, not permanent silence. I never asked why you came to Pine Ridge, Jack. Never asked why a man with your skills was content fixing roofs and plowing driveways. Figured you had your reasons. Jack stared at the papers in his hands, years of careful anonymity, reduced to a collection of public records and newspaper clippings. I did. I do. Well, whatever you're running from might be time to stop running. The mayor clapped him on the shoulder awkwardly. Town's behind you, son. Whatever you decide. After the mayor left, Jack stood in the yard, papers clutched in his fist, a cold sweat breaking out despite the chill. His carefully constructed sanctuary was crumbling, the walls between past and present dissolving like snow in spring. He found Rebecca in the kitchen with Emma, the two of them assembling sandwiches for lunch. They looked up as he entered, their easy camaraderie, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside him. Everything okay? Rebecca asked immediately, sensing his distress. Jack shook his head, unable to voice the threat contained in those papers. Emma watched him with Laura's eyes too perceptive by half. Dad, what's wrong? The reporter, Jack managed. He knows. About Seattle. About everything. Rebecca set down the knife she'd been using, her CEO persona sliding into place. What exactly did he say? What does he want? Nothing yet. Your offer bought us time, but he made sure I knew he could break the story whenever he wants. Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. This is exactly why I left Seattle. This is what I've been trying to protect Emma from. Protect me from what? Emma demanded, her small voice firm. From knowing people think you're a hero. I already know that. Jack looked at his daughter, really looked at her, stubborn chin, raised eyes clear and direct. Not a fragile child to be sheltered, but a person forming her own understanding of the world. It's not that simple, Em. It never is with you, she replied, the blunt assessment landing like a physical blow. But I'm not a baby. I know Mom died the same day you saved Sophia. I know that's why we moved here and changed our name. I know you feel bad about it. Jack stared at her, speechless at how much she'd pieced together on her own. Rebecca watched them both, wisely staying silent. How long have you known? Jack finally asked. Emma shrugged, suddenly looking younger. I found the newspaper in your desk drawer a couple years ago, the one with your picture, and I heard you talking to Grandpa on the phone once about changing our name back. A child's curiosity and an unlocked drawer overheard conversations, all adding up to a truth Jack had tried so desperately to shield her from. Why didn't you say anything? Emma's eyes filled with tears. Because you never talk about Mom. Ever. And I thought if I asked questions, you'd get sad again. Like you were when I was little. The realization hit Jack with stunning force. All these years he thought he had been protecting Emma, when in reality she'd been protecting him. The weight of it nearly brought him to his knees. Rebecca moved to Emma, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your dad was trying to do what he thought was best, Emma. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes even when they're trying to help. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. I know, but I'm not scared of what happened, Dad. I just want us to be able to talk about it. About Mom. Jack crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering his daughter into his arms, her thin frame fitting against him as perfectly as it had when she was a toddler. I'm sorry, Em, so sorry. You're right, we should talk about her. About everything. Over Emma's head, his eyes met Rebecca's. In her gaze, he saw not judgment, but understanding. And something else, a tentative hope, an offered hand across the chasm he'd dug between himself and the world. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Jack found Rebecca on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the night chill, staring at the stars visible between the pines. He settled beside her, the wooden steps creaking beneath his weight. Thank you, he said simply. For earlier. With Emma. Rebecca nodded, her breath fogging in the cold air. She's an incredible kid. Perceptive. Resilient. Like her mother. The words came easier than Jack expected. Laura was like that, saw through people's defenses, called out their bullshit, in the kindest way possible. Rebecca smiled. I wish I could have known her. She would have liked you, would have approved of you finding me, I think. Jack looked up at the vastness of stars overhead. She always said I had a hero complex, needed to save everyone. After the accident, after she died, I couldn't save anyone anymore, not even myself. But you did, Jack. You saved Emma. You built a life for her, however imperfect. Rebecca shifted closer, her shoulder touching his. And now maybe it's time to let someone else help save you. The touch, simple as it was, sent warmth spreading through Jack's chest, melting something frozen there for too long. I wouldn't know where to begin. San Francisco, Rebecca suggested, only half joking. Come visit, see Sophia. Let Emma see the ocean, ride a cable car. It doesn't have to be forever, just a start. Jack considered it, stepping back into the world, facing the past instead of running from it, giving Emma experiences beyond their small-town existence. The idea terrified and tempted him in equal measure. What if I can't do it? What if I freeze up or panic or... Then we adjust. We take it slow. We find what works. Rebecca turned to face him, her features silver in the moonlight. The point isn't to do it perfectly, Jack. The point is to treat you. In the starlit quiet of the Montana night, with the woman who had crossed a continent to find him sitting beside him, Jack finally allowed himself to consider the possibility that 8 years of running had taken him in a circle right back to the moment of choice, to dive in or remain safely on shore, to risk or to withdraw. In the distance, a wolf howled, a lonely, haunting sound that echoed through the valley before fading into silence. Jack took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, feeling it fill his lungs, feeling truly present in his body for the first time in years. Okay, he said finally, the single word carrying the weight of mountains. We'll try. 2 weeks passed before Dr. Mitchell cleared Rebecca for travel. 2 weeks of conference calls from Jack's kitchen table, Emma and Sophia's daily video chats, and quiet evenings by the fire after Emma went to bed. In those 14 days, something subtle but profound shifted between Jack and Rebecca Wall's carefully dismantled brick by careful brick, revealing glimpses of the people they might become to one another. The morning of Rebecca's departure dawned crisp and clear, sunlight glinting off fresh snow. Jack loaded her sleek designer suitcase into his weathered truck, while Emma extracted multiple promises from Rebecca on the cabin porch. You'll call as soon as you land, and Sophia will show me her science project tomorrow, and you won't forget about our visit. Emma's voice carried a note of anxiety. Jack recognized the fear of another person vanishing from her life. Rebecca knelt, despite her healing leg meeting Emma at eye level. I promise. February break, you and your dad will come to San Francisco. I've already marked my calendar and started planning. The drive to Billings Regional Airport unfolded in comfortable silence. Both adults aware of the undefined territory they now occupied, no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance, not quite friends, something unnamed hovering in the space between. At the terminal drop-off, Rebecca turned to Jack with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. I'll email you the flight details and everything else you need to know. Please don't worry about expenses. This is my invitation. Jack shifted uncomfortably. I can cover our costs. I know you can. Rebecca touched his arm lightly, her fingertips warm through his jacket sleeve. But this is my thank you. Please let me do this. The simple contact sent an unfamiliar warmth through Jack's chest, thawing something long frozen. All right, but I'm buying dinner at least once. Her smile transformed her face. Deal. There's a place on the pier with the best sourdough bread bowls in the city. As she turned toward the security line, Rebecca hesitated, then stepped back. Thank you, Jack, for saving Sophia, for letting me find you, for agreeing to come to San Francisco. I know what this costs you. Before he could respond, she pressed a quick, soft kiss to his cheek and disappeared into the crowd with one last wave. Jack stood motionless, the phantom sensation of her lips lingering on his skin, simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating after so many years of emotional numbness. The cabin felt strangely hollow upon his return. Emma wandered restlessly through rooms that seemed larger, emptier, without Rebecca's presence. Jack channeled his own restlessness into preparations, securing the cabin for their upcoming absence, arranging for Mrs. Larson to check in periodically, sorting through Emma's clothes for suitable city wear. That evening, after Emma went to bed, Jack found himself standing before his desk, staring at the bottom drawer he'd kept locked for 8 years. With slightly trembling hands, he inserted the key and pulled it open. Inside lay the carefully preserved remnants of Jack Marshall's life. his firefighter badge, newspaper clippings of the rescue, Laura's wedding ring, the ultrasound photo of their unborn son. He lifted each item carefully, allowing himself for the first time since her death to remember Laura not as a loss but as the vibrant woman she'd been. The passionate landscape architect who could look at barren earth and see gardens waiting to emerge. The advocate who'd fought tirelessly for better safety equipment for firefighters' families. The woman whose laugh could transform a room whose absence had left a void he'd tried to fill with silence and isolation. "You would have kicked my ass for running away," he whispered to the empty room, "for keeping Emma hidden all these years." The realization didn't crush him as expected. Instead, it settled like a truth too long denied, painful but clarifying. Laura, who'd embraced life with such fierce joy, would have wanted them both to do the same, not shrink into shadows of themselves. Jack returned the mementos to the drawer, but left it unlocked. A small gesture, but significant, the past no longer sealed away, but accessible. Part of the whole rather than sectioned off. The following morning, Emma found him at the kitchen table reviewing property tax notices with a furrowed brow. "Dad? What's wrong?" Jack looked up, surprised to find his daughter watching him with Laura's perceptive eyes. He'd tried to shield Emma from financial worries, but her awareness of his moods had grown sharper with each passing year. "Just some grown-up paperwork, Em. The county's raising property taxes again." Emma pulled out a chair, climbing up to peer at the documents with solemn interest. "Is it a lot more?" Jack hesitated, then decided on honesty. "About 30% more, and the roof needs repairs before next winter." "Is that why you looked worried when talking to Mayor Thompson yesterday?" Jack stared at his daughter, once again caught off guard by her perception. "How did you know about that?" Emma shrugged. "I saw him leaving. He looked serious and then you looked worried." Jack set the papers aside, giving Emma his full attention. "You're right. The taxes are going up and the cabin needs work. But we'll figure it out, we always do." Emma's next words took him completely by surprise. "We should talk about Mom more." Jack's breath caught. "What?" "Rebecca told me stories about Sophia's dad, even though they're not married anymore." Emma traced patterns on the wooden table with her finger. "But you never talk about Mom. I don't even know what her laugh sounded like." The observation pierced Jack's carefully constructed defenses. For 8 years, he'd thought silence would protect Emma from his pain. Instead, he'd deprived her of her mother's memory. "Your mom had the best laugh," Jack began, his voice rough with emotion. It started quiet, almost like she was trying to hold it in, then just exploded. Filled the whole room, made everyone around her laugh too. Emma's eyes widened with hungry interest. "What else?" "She loved thunderstorms. Would drag me onto the porch to watch them roll in. Said you could feel the air change right before lightning struck, like the world holding its breath." "Like me," Emma exclaimed. "I love watching storms from the porch." Jack smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Exactly like you. You get that from her." For the next hour, Jack shared stories about Laura, her stubbornness, her talent for making any space beautiful, her terrible singing voice that never stopped her from belting out songs while driving. With each memory shared, he felt something lighten in his chest, as if speaking her name aloud was gradually transforming grief from a crushing weight into a bearable presence. When Emma finally left to work on her latest drawing project, Jack found himself alone with the realization that perhaps the greatest disservice he'd done wasn't to himself, but to Emma, depriving her of the mother she would never know in his attempt to outrun his own pain. Later that day, an unexpected email arrived from Rebecca. Jack expected flight details for their upcoming visit, but instead found a job posting. Horizon Tech was seeking a remote safety consultant with experience in emergency management and structural assessment. The qualifications listed matched Jack's firefighter background perfectly, with emphasis on practical experience rather than academic credentials or corporate history. "I'm not asking you to apply," Rebecca's note clarified. "Just wanted you to know options exist that would let you stay in Montana while expanding your horizons. No pressure, just information." Jack stared at the screen, conflicting emotions churning through him. Gratitude for her thoughtfulness, pride that bristled at the implication he needed help, hope at the prospect of steady income that wouldn't require leaving Pine Ridge. Beneath it all ran a warming realization that Rebecca truly saw him, Not as a broken man hiding in the mountains, but as someone with valuable skills and potential beyond his current circumstances. The days before their San Francisco trip passed in a flurry of preparation and mounting anticipation. Emma researched city attractions with methodical precision, creating a detailed list ranked by priority. Jack alternated between practical arrangements and moments of panic at the thought of returning to urban life, to crowds and noise, to a place that might trigger memories of the day everything changed. 3 weeks after Rebecca's departure, they boarded a flight from Billings to San Francisco. Emma claimed the window seat, her face pressed to the glass as Montana disappeared beneath cloud cover. Her excitement vibrated through the armrests they shared. Jack focused on her joy, using it to anchor himself against the rising tide of anxiety as they flew toward the city he'd fled. They landed under brilliant California sunshine, the February weather a stark contrast to Montana's deep freeze. Emma practically bounced down the jetway, straining to spot Rebecca and Sophia in the waiting crowd. Jack followed more sedately, scanning unfamiliar faces with the hypervigilance that had become second nature over 8 years of self-imposed isolation. The crowd parted, and there they stood, Rebecca looking polished and professional, in city clothes, a stark contrast to the woman who'd borrowed his flannel shirts and wool socks, and beside her a girl with familiar dark curls, taller than Emma, but with the same serious eyes Jack remembered from the river. "Dad, there they are!" Emma broke into a run, weaving through travelers until she reached Sophia, the two girls embracing as if they'd known each other for years, rather than through video calls. Rebecca approached more slowly, giving Jack time to steady himself amidst the airport chaos. "Welcome to San Francisco," she greeted, her smile warm but careful, recognizing the strain evident in his posture. "Thanks for having us." Jack managed the words inadequate, but all he could summon as the cacophony of announcements, conversations, and rolling luggage threatened to overwhelm senses accustomed to forest quiet. "Let's get you out of here," Rebecca said softly, understanding in her eyes. Cars waiting curbside. The drive from airport to city passed in a blur of concrete and glass, Emma and Sophia chattering excitedly in the back seat, while Jack watched the unfamiliar landscape with wary eyes. San Francisco materialized from highway haze, buildings climbing skyward hills, rolling toward water, the iconic bridge in the distance. Beautiful but overwhelming to a man who'd grown accustomed to measuring his surroundings in acres rather than blocks. Rebecca's home surprised him, not the sleek modern penthouse he'd expected, but a lovingly restored Victorian with bay windows and intricate gingerbread trim. Inside, the space unfolded in warm colors and comfortable furnishings, walls lined with books and artwork, sunlight streaming through stained glass transoms. "Not what you expected." Rebecca noted his expression as she showed them to their rooms, connecting spaces with a shared bathroom. Jack shook his head. "I thought it would be more, corporate glass and chrome," Rebecca smiled. "I spent enough time in that world at the office. Home needed to be different." The girls disappeared immediately to Sophia's room, leaving the adults in momentary silence. Rebecca studied Jack, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to windows and exits, assessment behaviors ingrained from his firefighter days, amplified by years of isolation. "This must be hard for you," she acknowledged quietly. "Being here, in the city." Jack took a deep breath, forcing himself to meet her gaze directly. "Harder and easier than expected. Just loud, busy. We'll take it slow. No pressure, no schedules. If anything gets overwhelming, just say so." Rebecca hesitated. "Sophia knows the basics, that you saved her from the river, that you lost your wife the same day. She won't ask difficult questions unless you indicate you're open to them." The thoughtfulness of this preparation touched Jack deeply. "Thank you for that, for understanding." That evening, after the girls had finally been persuaded to sleep, Jack found himself drawn to the bedroom window, gazing at unfamiliar city lights. The vastness of urban landscape stretched before him, simultaneously intimidating and oddly beautiful. So different from his Montana stars, yet compelling in its own human-made way. A soft knock pulled him from contemplation. Rebecca entered at his invitation, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Hot chocolate," she explained. "I thought you might have trouble sleeping in a new place." Jack accepted the mug gratefully, the rich aroma bringing unexpected memories of childhood winter evenings when his father would make the same treat after sledding expeditions. "Thanks. It's strange being surrounded by so many people after so long in the quiet." Rebecca settled into the window seat, leaving comfortable space between them. Any regrets about coming? No, Jack answered immediately, surprising himself with the certainty. Seeing Emma with Sophia, watching her experience all this newness, it's worth the discomfort. They sipped their chocolate in companionable silence until Rebecca spoke again. Tomorrow after the museum, I thought, if you're up for it, we could drive by the Duwamish River, where it happened. Cold shock ran through Jack's system, chocolate suddenly tasteless in his mouth. Why would we do that? Rebecca's expression remained gentle, non-pressuring. Sometimes facing the actual place where trauma occurred can help process it. Make it real but finite, contained in space and time, rather than expanding endlessly in memory. She paused. But only if you want to. It's completely your choice. Jack considered the idea instinctive rejection softening as he weighed her words. He'd spent 8 years avoiding any reminder of that day, sealing off memories like radioactive material, too dangerous to approach. But what if that avoidance had only given those memories more power? I'll think about it. He promised, not committing, but not refusing either, a small victory against his habitual retreat from difficulty. The following morning, Jack woke before dawn, the unfamiliar city noises having disrupted his sleep. Rather than trying to force himself back to bed, he dressed quietly and slipped outside into pre-dawn San Francisco. The streets were surprisingly peaceful, only occasional early commuters and delivery trucks breaking the stillness. He found himself walking toward the water, drawn by some internal compass, to the Presidio trails Rebecca had mentioned. As the sun crested the horizon, Jack stood on a bluff overlooking the bay, watching golden light spill across water and transform the city behind him. For the first time since arriving, he felt his shoulders relax, breathing coming easier as he discovered a pocket of peace within the urban landscape. The Exploratorium proved to be nothing like the sterile science museum Jack had expected. Instead, it was a vibrant playground of interactive exhibits spread along the waterfront. Emma and Sophia raced from station to station, their excitement infectious as they manipulated giant bubble wands, experimented with sound tubes, and created miniature tornadoes in water tanks. Jack found himself drawn into their enthusiasm, his firefighter's natural curiosity about how things worked reawakening as he explored alongside them. Rebecca moved through the space with the girls, occasionally offering explanations, but mostly allowing them to discover on their own, her joy and their excitement evident. By mid-afternoon, even the girls admitted exhaustion. They stopped at a waterfront restaurant for a late lunch, Emma animatedly recounting her favorite exhibits, while Sophia added technical details about the scientific principles involved. Jack watched them, a bittersweet realization forming. Emma needed this kind of intellectual stimulation, these connections with minds that worked like hers. Pine Ridge, for all its safety and natural beauty, couldn't provide these opportunities. After lunch, as they walked along the Embarcadero, Rebecca quietly asked, "Have you decided about visiting the river?" Jack had been turning the question over throughout the day, weighing fear against potential healing. "Yes," he finally answered, "but not with the girls. They don't need to see that place." Rebecca nodded. "My mother can watch them at the house. I'll drive you." The Duwamish River looked smaller than Jack remembered. The bridge where the bus had plunged over was mundane in daylight, just concrete and steel spanning dark water, no hint of the tragedy that had unfolded there 8 years earlier. Rebecca parked in a small lot near the riverside path, then simply waited, letting Jack decide how to approach this moment. After several minutes of silence, he opened the car door. "I need to see it up close." They walked together to the riverbank, following the path to the spot where Jack had pulled Sophia from the water. Winter had stripped the trees bare, the landscape stark under clouding skies. Jack stopped at the exact location, memories crashing over him, the freezing water, the weight of the child in his arms, the chaos of emergency vehicles and bystanders. "It was raining," he said quietly. "Not hard, just steady, cold. The bus hit the guardrail and went over before anyone could react. I was driving by, saw it happen." Rebecca stood beside him, silent, allowing him to narrate at his own pace. "I didn't think, just parked and ran. Other people were calling 911, but no one was going in the water." Jack's eyes fixed on the river's current. "I could see the bus, sinking passengers pressing against windows. When I got in, the water was already chest high inside. Sophia was in the back, a small purple jacket. She wasn't moving." The memories were vivid now, but strangely, Jack found he could access them without being consumed by them. I got her out first because she was smallest, not breathing. Handed her to paramedics on shore, went back for more. Got two adults out before other emergency responders arrived. He fell silent, watching the river flow past, carrying sticks and leaves in its current. My phone rang while I was helping the second adult. Laura's ringtone. I was soaking wet hands numb from cold. I thought I'd call her back in a few minutes. Rebecca's hand found his, her fingers warm against his chilled skin. You couldn't have known, Jack. That's just it. I couldn't have known, couldn't have prevented it. Jack turned to face her, revelation dawning. All these years I've been punishing myself as if I made a choice, Sophia or Laura, but there was no choice. Just two separate tragedies that happened on the same day. The insight, simple yet profound, shifted something fundamental in Jack's perception. The weight he'd carried for 8 years didn't vanish, but it transformed, becoming finite rather than all-consuming. A tragedy he'd experienced rather than a failure he'd caused. Rebecca's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Laura would be proud of you, Jack, for saving Sophia, for raising Emma so beautifully, for surviving when it would have been easier not to. As they stood by the river where everything had changed, Jack allowed himself to consider the possibility that she was right, that Laura would have understood, would have wanted him to forgive himself, would have encouraged him to build a new life rather than shrink from living. I'm ready to go now, he said quietly, giving the river one last look before turning away. They returned to find the girls deep in an engineering project constructing a miniature Golden Gate Bridge from materials in Sophia's craft room. Their concentration was so complete they barely acknowledged the adults' return, merely waving distractedly before returning to their work. That evening after dinner, Sophia approached Jack with careful determination, a wrapped package held in both hands. This is for you, she said, her voice steady despite the obvious nervousness in her posture. Mom helped me make it. Jack unwrapped the gift, slowly revealing a hand-bound book with a soft leather cover. Inside, the first page showed a child's crayon drawing of a man pulling a girl from water, labeled in shaky handwriting, "The Man Who Saved Me." The subsequent pages chronicled Sophia's life school photos, science fair ribbons, family trips, birthdays, each annotated with her own handwriting. The final page held a recent photograph of Sophia standing on the Golden Gate Bridge, looking out at the water with the sun setting behind her. The caption read, "Because of you, I got to see all of this. Thank you for my life." Jack's vision blurred as emotion welled up thick and overwhelming. Emma pressed against his side, peeking at the book with unconcealed curiosity. Sophia stood before him, waiting with the patience of a child who understood the weight of the moment. "Sophia," Jack managed, his voice rough with feeling. "This is thank you." The girl nodded seriously. "Mom says sometimes people who save others don't get to see what happens after. I wanted you to know what happened after." Such simple words, but they penetrated directly to the core of what had haunted Jack for years. The sense that his actions, however heroic in the moment, had cost more than they'd gained. Here, captured in photographs, in childish handwriting, was tangible proof of value, of meaning, of life, continuing because of his choice to act. Jack opened his arms and Sophia stepped into them without hesitation. "I'm glad you're okay," he whispered against her dark curls so similar to Emma's. "I'm glad I was there that day." And for the first time since it happened, he meant it completely. The remainder of their visit unfolded with unexpected ease. Jack found himself relaxing into the rhythm of city life, discovering pockets of peace amidst the bustle, the Japanese tea garden in Golden Gate Park, the quiet reading room at the Mechanics Institute Library, sunrise walks along the Presidio trails before the city fully awakened. Emma blossomed in the stimulating environment, her natural curiosity finding endless outlets. Jack watched her absorb new experiences with growing certainty that he needed to provide more opportunities like this, even if it meant pushing beyond his own comfort zone. On their final morning, Rebecca received an unexpected call that pulled her away to the office for an emergency meeting. With a few hours to fill before their scheduled activities, Jack impulsively decided to take Emma to the beach. They walked along the shore, collecting interesting shells and watching container ships glide beneath the Golden Gate Bridge. "Dad?" Emma asked, her small hands secure in his as they navigated around a tide pool. "Can we come back here again someday?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. "Would you like that?" Emma nodded emphatically. "I want to see everything." The Science Museum had a sign about nighttime programs where you can sleep under the fish tanks. And Sophia says there's a place where you can make your own robots, but we need more time. Jack studied his daughter's animated face, seeing Laura's curiosity and enthusiasm shining through. I think we could make that happen. Really? The hope in Emma's voice made his chest tighten. Really? Maybe this summer when the weather's nicer. Emma stopped walking, turning to face him with sudden seriousness. Dad, are we going to be okay with the pieces in the roof and everything? The directness of the question caught Jack off guard. What makes you ask that? I heard you talking to Mayor Thompson, and I saw you looking at Rebecca's email about the job. Emma dug her toe into the sand. Would that job be bad? Working for Rebecca's company? Jack knelt down to her level, struck once again by how perceptive his daughter had become. No, Em, it wouldn't be bad at all. I've gotten used to doing everything on my own. Asking for help, taking opportunities from other people, that's hard for me. But why Rebecca wants to help because she cares about us, not because she thinks we can't do it ourselves. Out of the mouths of babes, Jack thought his daughter's simple wisdom cutting through years of stubborn pride. You're right. Sometimes I forget that accepting help can be a strength, not a weakness. When they returned to Rebecca's house, the girls disappeared upstairs while Jack checked their flight details for the following morning. His phone chimed with a text message from Mrs. Larson back in Pine Ridge. The image that loaded made his stomach drop. Heavy snowfall had caused part of the cabin roof to collapse the section over his bedroom and part of the living area. The damage was substantial, though according to Mrs. Larson, Emma's room remained untouched. Rebecca found him staring at the phone, his expression unreadable. What's wrong? Part of the cabin roof caved in under the snow. He handed her the phone showing the damage. Rebecca studied the images with a frown. How bad is it? Bad enough. More than I can fix alone, more than I can afford to hire out right now. Jack set the phone down carefully. The universe has interesting timing. What do you mean? I finally decide to stop hiding, to start rebuilding our lives, and suddenly our actual home starts falling apart. Feels symbolic. Rebecca's analytical mind immediately turned to practical solutions. You could extend your stay until you figure things out. You and Emma are welcome here as long as you need. Jack shook his head, though the offer tempted him more than he wanted to admit. No, we need to go back, face this directly. Pine Ridge is still home, whatever comes next. At least let me help, Rebecca pressed. Not charity and investment, in whatever form makes you comfortable. Pride warred with practicality in Jack's mind. Emma needed a secure home regardless of his discomfort with accepting help. Let me think about it. Figure out what makes sense. That evening, Rebecca suggested dinner on the waterfront at a restaurant where they could watch the sunset behind the Golden Gate Bridge. The girls chattered excitedly about maintaining their friendship long distance, making plans for summer visits, and joint science projects they could collaborate on remotely. As twilight descended and the bridge lights illuminated against the darkening sky, Rebecca turned to Jack. What are you thinking about? You've been quiet. Jack considered the question carefully. About choices. About how sometimes what looks like the end of everything is just a painful transition to something different. Not better, not worse, just different. Rebecca nodded, understanding in her eyes. And how are you feeling about returning to Montana tomorrow? Ready, Jack answered honestly. Ready to go back, but also ready to start making changes. Emma needs more than Pine Ridge can offer academically, socially. And I think, he paused, gathering courage, I think I need more too. More what? More purpose, more connection. Jack met her gaze directly. That job posting you sent, is it still open? Rebecca's smile bloomed slowly. As a matter of fact, it is. The hiring manager is a personal friend who's been instructed to hold it open until a certain qualified candidate might express interest. Jack shook his head, amused despite himself. You're persistent, Mid-Morgan. So I've been told, Mr. Lawson. Rebecca's expression grew more serious. It would mean some travel occasionally, consulting on safety systems for our remote facilities. Not constant, but periodic trips to Seattle, Portland, Denver. Could you handle that? The question contained layers of meaning beyond the practical. Could he handle returning to the wider world, facing painful memories, building a new professional identity that honored his past experience rather than hiding from it? I think so, Jack said slowly. Not all at once, but yes, I could handle it. They were interrupted by the girls' excited exclamations as the bridge lights completed their illumination, transforming the iconic structure into a glowing sculpture against the night sky. Jack watched Emma's face alight with wonder and felt certainty solidify within him. It was time to stop hiding, to stop shrinking their world to the size of his fear. After dinner, Rebecca's mother arrived to take the girls for ice cream, leaving Jack and Rebecca alone for the first time since their arrival. They found themselves on a rooftop deck, gazing at the city lights spreading below them like a galaxy of earthbound stars. "I have a proposition about the cabin," Rebecca said, finally breaking their comfortable silence. "Business, not charity." Jack raised an eyebrow, wariness mixing with curiosity. "I'm listening." "Horizon Tech needs a remote testing facility for our environmental monitoring systems, somewhere with real weather, real terrain challenges." She turned to face him. "What if we renovated your cabin, added a small outbuilding lab space? You'd be our on-site expert maintenance manager. We'd cover the improvements, pay fair rental for the land usage." Jack stared at her, processing the unexpected proposal. "You want to put a tech lab in the Montana wilderness? Our systems are designed for wilderness deployment. Makes more sense than testing them in a Silicon Valley warehouse." Rebecca's business persona was evident in her crisp logic. "It's a legitimate need for the company, not something I invented to help you. And the cabin repairs the roof would be included in the facility development budget." Her expression softened. "Jack, this isn't about saving you. It's about recognizing an opportunity that benefits everyone involved. The company gets a testing site, you get income and repairs, Emma gets stability, plus exposure to cutting-edge science." Jack considered the proposal, searching for holes or hidden pitfalls. Finding none, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. "It sounds surprisingly perfect." Rebecca's smile held a hint of triumph. "So we have a deal." "We have a deal." The simple agreement felt momentous, a tangible commitment to something beyond the tentative connection they'd been building. Something with structure, purpose, future. "There's something else I need to tell you," Jack said, his voice growing serious. "I've been thinking about changing our name back. From Lawson to Marshall." Rebecca tilted her head, studying him. "That's a big step. Emma should have her mother's name. Laura Marshall. Emma Marshall. That connection matters." Jack looked out at the glittering city. "And maybe it's time I stopped trying to be someone else." Jack Marshall made mistakes, had flaws, but he also had purpose, had connections, believed in things worth believing in. "I like Jack Marshall," Rebecca said softly, "though I've grown rather fond of Jack Lawson too." Something in her tone drew his gaze back to her face, illuminated in the soft glow of the deck lighting. The walls he'd maintained for 8 years had thinned to transparent membranes, allowing him to really see the remarkable woman before him. Not just Rebecca Morgan, CEO, but Rebecca who burned pancakes and laughed at herself, who taught Emma engineering principles with infinite patience, who'd crossed a continent to thank the man who saved her daughter. "What happens when we go back to Montana?" he asked quietly. "To this, whatever this is between us." Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "What do you want to happen?" "I want—" Jack paused, organizing thoughts he'd barely allowed himself to acknowledge. "I want to call you, not just about the job or the cabin renovations. I want to tell you about Emma's science projects and the first spring wildflowers and the ridiculous town council meetings where everyone argues for an hour about the color of the new welcome sign." Rebecca's smile warmed. "I'd like that. And maybe I call you too. About Sophia's latest invention, about the board members who spent 45 minutes debating the shade of blue in the company logo. I'd like that too." Jack reached for her hand, the contact sending warmth through him despite the cool night air. "And maybe sometimes when I'm consulting in California, I stay an extra day. Or you bring Sophia to Montana in summer, show her what stars really look like away from city lights." Rebecca's fingers interlaced with his. "Maybe we see where this goes without expectations or pressures. Just two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, figuring things out one step at a time." Jack nodded, possibilities unfurling before him like a map to unexplored territories. "I've spent 8 years looking backward, afraid to move forward. I'm ready to try something different." "Different is good," Rebecca murmured, moving closer until their shoulders touch faces turned toward the glittering city below. Different is where new beginnings happen. Their flight home departed under morning fog, Emma's face pressed to the window as San Francisco disappeared beneath cloud cover. Beside her, Jack reviewed renovation plans. Rebecca's corporate architect had sketched overnight, the cabin restored but improved a small lab building nestled among the pines. Everything designed to blend with the natural surroundings. As Montana's mountains materialized through breaks in the cloud layer, Jack felt neither the dread of returning to isolation nor the panic of facing necessary changes. Instead, he experienced something he hadn't dared hope for in 8 long years, anticipation for what might come next. Not certainty, not guaranteed happiness, but possibility. The damaged cabin awaiting them represented not an ending, but a renovation, a chance to rebuild differently, to create a home that honored the past while making space for a future not yet written. "We're going to be okay, Em," Jack said, as the plane began its descent, the snow-covered landscape growing closer. "Whatever happens next, we're going to be okay." Emma smiled up at his, Laura's eyes shining with inherited determination. "I know, Dad. We always were. We just forgot how to see it."